What's up, everybody? It's Dr. Greg Gillespie. Super excited to be with you today. We're going to hold on for just another moment to let everybody jump on in. But I think we're all familiar with how Zoom works these days. One day we'll get back to in-person lectures. I'm excited for that day. Well, I don't know about you guys. It's 4 p.m. on the West Coast in the United States, and I just got done with my day. Just finished cementing a crown in the interior, so it was very pertinent to our discussion today. I was thinking about all the things I'm about to talk about, and I was like, am I doing everything just the way I'm going to recommend? I hope so. All right, a couple more people logging on here. Okay, so today we are talking about cementation. I hope it's not too boring of a subject. I think that it's not, because there are so many cements that are coming out on the market continually that I think it's something that could always be talked about. Today I wanted to cover really the majority of your single unit restorations that you're doing in the anterior, posterior. If we have time, we could do more veneer cementation. In the past, really 2 years, I've moved quite a bit over to the cosmetic end, and that I'm doing like 3 days a week of cosmetic and then 1 day a week of surgery and other stuff. So I do a heavy amount of cosmetic dentistry at this point. So we could talk quite a bit about that, or maybe we do that for another time. But today, let's talk about posterior cementation, more or less. We're going to cover a lot. We'll cover a whole bunch of stuff. I wanted to thank Bisco for sponsoring this. So this is not a advertisement for Bisco, but I've worked with Bisco for, probably like 10 years now. In that, one of the first times I met Young, he told me about his company, and I was so intrigued with the way that they're so research-based. And then Dr. Nunez, Rolando Nunez, right? He is, whenever you can have a chance to hear him speak, I definitely would. And he's one of their primary researchers there, but they are so heavily based in science and research that I really appreciate their approach to dentistry and trying to improve dentistry. And so they're sponsoring this, but I use so many different products in my practice, 3M and Cavocur and, well, I guess, which is now just Cur Dental and Dentsply Sirona and Curare. There's so many really good manufacturers out there. So today, I really want to talk about concepts more than products, but I wanted to thank Bisco for supporting this, because they really do value high education and learning by everybody. Now, so this is the question I get all the time. Dr. Greg, what cement should I use? And it's interesting because some people will be like, Gordon says I should use this, right? Some people go off of Gordon Christensen, or Coy says I should use this. And sometimes the response is always, well, Reliax Unicem is a great cement. And so people will go off of that. Or probably more apt right now is, what's the hottest thing on Instagram, right? In your stories, what are all your influencers using? I have a whole bunch of people that I follow on Instagram, and there are some great doctors. But I don't think we should ever make a decision just solely on what are people doing on Instagram, or what are these, key opinion leaders saying, right? We need to think things through a little bit better. So today I'm hoping that I can give you some tools to make the decisions the best way possible, not just off of what, people that we trust in what they say. And I got this concept from, I like to call him a friend, even though I don't even know him, but Coach Bennett. He's the global Nike running coach. And I right now am training for a marathon. I'm 3 weeks away. October 2nd will be my first marathon ever. During COVID, I had the idea that I wanted to draw closer to my son, who was 16. And we had the idea to run a marathon together. And I had no idea what that meant. I recently just ran 21 miles yesterday, and holy cow, it was so hard. But I am learning a whole bunch from Coach. And if you guys ever want someone to give you a fantastic run or just a great point of view, Coach Bennett is hilarious, and he's so great. And he has a number of different sayings, and he talks about every run has a purpose, right? You get started and you have him in your ear, and he talks about what's the purpose of your run today, because every run has a purpose. And maybe it's a short run, or maybe it's a long run, or maybe it's a speed run, or maybe it's a tempo run, or maybe it's a fartlek run. And there are all these different reasons to be running. But he tries to help you recognize that every run has a purpose, and you shouldn't run the run differently than what the purpose is. So I was oftentimes trying to chase after my son. There's my son. His name's Lewis. He's 17. And here we are running along the Columbia River. And this was our first 10-mile run. And I thought I was in pretty good conditioning. I've been working, right? Doing some recovery runs, doing some tempo runs. And I was listening to Coach, and he talks about that every run has a purpose, and start smart and don't go too fast. But Lewis was out the gates, and I didn't want to be too far behind him. And I'm like, well, Lewis is in cross country, and he's, been training. So I was trying to follow him. And this is what happened, right? You can see from mile 1, I started to get a little bit faster, right? 8:42, 8:20, 8:15, right? Feeling really good about mile 3. And then miles 4 through 10, I just got slower and slower and slower. And I felt like I had no more energy left. I got done with mile 10 and I was beat. And I'm like, oh my goodness, how am I going to do another 16 and a half miles to do a marathon? I was just spent. And so I went back, I did some more recovery runs. I listened to Coach. And then a couple Saturdays later, this was my next run, running along this lake there. And I live right near Portland, Oregon. And it's gorgeous there. I get super lucky with these beautiful runs. But I listened to Coach, and I was thinking about the purpose of this run. It's a long run. I've got to start slow and then get into the run, gradually get into the run, let this run really develop. It's going to be a long time. It was 15 miles. And what was interesting is that in this time, when I did the run the right way, you can see that I started a little bit slower, mile 1, and then I kept essentially the same pace for my first, 11 miles. And 11 miles, I was feeling really good. I started to feel better and better. And at mile 15, I was going faster than I had, and I felt like I could go another 10. I was feeling so good at mile 15. I could not believe it. I was just like on cloud 9. I was super excited. I was like, I can't wait to tell people about this. When I did run the right way, when I followed the right purpose of the run, when I wasn't focused on what other people were doing, when I was just zeroing in on the whole purpose, I realized, no, I can do this, and I can do it the right way. So I thought, if every run has a purpose, and Coach Bennett always says, because this is about running, and this is not about running. And so I've decided that I would share that and decide that, it's not just that every run has a purpose. If we relate that into our lives clinically every day, every procedure has a purpose, right? And today I want to be your coach. That's me, Dr. Greg. So if every procedure has a purpose, then maybe we can break down cementation a little bit better and think about it in that way. Okay, so oftentimes dentists, again, start with the cement. All right, this is my favorite cement. Maybe it's Reliax, maybe it's Theracem, maybe it's Maxim, whatever it is. And they're like, how can I make this cement work with this ceramic so it can work on the tooth? And I think, well, I'm not sure that's the right sequence to be thinking things. And then other people think, hey, if I'm cementing a zirconia crown, what cement should I use? I get that all the time. If I'm cementing zirconia, what cement is best? I don't even think we should look at it that way, because is that really the purpose? Do I look at it that way? Or should I think of it this way? What is the tooth dictating so that I can determine what cement I need to use in order to function with that ceramic? The tooth preparation design that you and I are in control of well, most of the time, right? But sometimes we have no choices because we don't have a lot of tooth structure remaining or clearance or whatever. That prep design, that should dictate what cement we have to use, whether it's a retentive cement or a non-retentive cement or a semi-retentive cement, right? Or a primed resin cement. And then once we figure out what cement we're using, how do we make that cement work with the ceramic that we have in front of us? All right, so for this prep design, now let's go back. Every procedure has a purpose. Let's think of the prep design. What's that purpose? What do we got? What's staring us in the face today, right? What's the purpose of this cementation? Is it a non-retentive cementation? Is it a retentive cementation? And I felt like, I don't know about you, I wish that this category was so cut and dry that it was just non-retentive or retentive. But I feel like that there's probably a third category, and that's semi-retentive, because sometimes the buccal, I have a really nice ferrule on the buccal, but on the lingual, my ferrule is not too big, or mesiodistally, you know what I'm talking about, right? So let's say we have 3 types of preps, right? Let me go back here. This non-retentive prep. I don't know if you guys, but you get these situations, right? This guy comes in, number 18, gold crown, huge hole in it, and he's worn it through. He's like, doc, this is the second gold crown that I've had, and I want something that's not gonna wear through. I've broken a ceramic crown. I've had a couple of gold crowns. This guy designs Harley Davidsons. And so we decided we were going to go with the zirconia. But the reality is that this is a non-retentive preparation in the posterior, right? It ramps up on the distal of 18. You have 15 with a big cuff coming down. I'm just super hard, right? It's just the reality of what we're dealing with. So you got this type of prep, and you have this much retention in your zirconia crown. You're thinking, how am I going to make that thing stick? So that would be an example of when we're thinking of the procedure, it has a purpose. This cementation is probably have to do with the non-retentive prep. What if it was semi-retentive, right? These are pretty common posteriorly. Maybe you get something like an endo-treated tooth like this one, and on the lingual, it's just not as retentive as the buccal, right? You can see this prep that I have here, the model, and there's a nice buccal wall, but the lingual wall just wasn't super retentive, not a huge ferrule. So maybe a semi-retentive preparation is what our cementation is going to be that day. Or then maybe we get lucky and we go with the easy ones with these premolars, with super tall walls everywhere. We get a retentive prep. We have a nice design, and we can basically use almost any cement there. Right? We'll talk about it a little more later. Okay, so if we know what the purpose, we know what that procedure is going to be, if it's going to be retentive or non-retentive, then we can move to that cement. And now we think about the cement. What purpose do each of these cements play? So I think that we could really categorize our cements into these 3 types of preparations, right? Your non-retentive cements are going to be your, obviously your veneer cements. You know, Bisco has Choice 2, Variolink, Biavaclar, NX3, Kerr, right? These are all going to be bonded in some cementation, right? This is full etch in the anterior if we have enamel, or at least we are priming the dentin in the posterior, right? But these will always be using a primer on the tooth. Now, there are other products that have been almost invented for this purpose of having a primed resin cement. There are some that even you don't have to cure on the tooth, but the idea is that now you have bonding agents that are formulated to work with cements in these semi-retentive areas where you're trying to get more bond strengths, but maybe you don't want to use your total etch resin cements, or you're just strictly resin cements, right? And you want to, a dual syringe, a dual cured, you want maybe not just light cured, you want a dual cure component there. And so there are these primed resin cements. And then you have the next core category which would be under your retentive cements. These are mostly your self-adhesive resin or RMGIs. These would be cements where you're not using any type of primer or you're not using any type of adhesive on the tooth, right? So I would say in reality, non-retentive and semi-retentive become almost the same thing, especially posteriorly, that you have to be using an adhesive on the tooth and a primer in the ceramic, right? Now there are cements, again, like what I was saying, there are more cements that have come into play, like Panavia V5 by Curare. They actually created this cement just for this purpose. So they have actually a tooth primer. You can see there's a tooth primer that's different from their regular adhesive, where that's a primed resin cement. Or like 3M, they introduced Reliax Ultimate, which was like, and now they have a universal one as well. But the idea is that it goes with their universal bonding agent, right? Bisco's got one, All Bond Universal, which has always worked with Dual Link Universal, a great cement. But all of these cements, right, non-retentive and semi-retentive, are all adhesive on the tooth and primer in the ceramic. Now, what's interesting is that some of these manufacturers, to try to make it even easier, have taken some of these cements under the retentive category, and they say, hey, if you add your universal adhesive, now this self-adhesive resin cement can become a primed resin cement. But the question is, how strong is that, right? Where is that window? How much stronger is it? But that's a way to move from the retentive category to the semi-retentive category. Now, you can't do that with every cement, but certain self-adhesive resin cements you can do that with. All right? That being said, these manufacturers have created, like Curare, what I was saying here with the tooth primer. That tooth primer doesn't work with Maxim Elite, right? And the cements don't dual cure, right? Panavia V5 won't dual cure with All Bond Universal. It won't have a dark cure, right? A lot of these products have dark cures where the polymerization will become more complete if you use the corresponding adhesive with that cement. So you might think that you're getting the ultimate in polymerization, but you won't if you're not using that same cement with the adhesive. So for example, let's take a posterior, you're doing a zirconia crown, you know that the light isn't penetrating deep all the way through that zirconia crown. And so you have to rely on almost all chemical polymerization, that dual cure portion, right? Because you may get some light right around the margins, but a lot of that cement just has to set up on its own. And so if you're trying to get the maximum benefit from a cement, using the same manufacturer for the adhesive component as well as the cement makes the most sense because they're formulated to work together. Now, I think Kerr came out with one that was formulated not to, because like that cement could work with any manufacturer's adhesive. But the reality is, just for simplicity's sake, if you want the maximum benefit of your cement, still go with the same manufacturer adhesive. That will usually get as the maximum benefit that you can. Okay, so we've talked about the purpose. If we're cementing with the different types of prep designs, we've categorized a number of different cements, and you can shoot me an email if you're curious about a certain cement that you're like, hey, what type of cement would this be? I can help you out there. But now when it comes to ceramic, okay, every procedure has a purpose with the ceramic. Okay, now we've gone from the prep and we have our categories of our cements. Now what about these ceramics? How am I gonna make the cement work with this ceramic? Okay, let's think about it this way. In zirconia, right, for your non-retentive and semi-retentive preparations, you have to have a primer. Okay, this is now we're talking about on the ceramic. For your retentive preparations, you don't really need it. Can you use one? Sure, but you're relying more on the preparation itself rather than the primer to get the best result possible. I mean, your preparation, right, is determining whether or not you need that primer. But if it's non-retentive or semi-retentive, you need to make sure you have a primer. And understanding which primer is really, really important. All right, let's think about it and maybe in this way. If zirconia is your substrate, what is the process you have to go through to get the proper micromechanical retention and proper chemical interaction so your shear bond strengths are the highest possible? Okay? Micromechanical retention. With zirconia, we know that you cannot etch zirconia with a hydrofluoric acid, right? Can't do it. It's not a glass ceramic. You have to sandblast it. Sandblasting is super duper important when bonding zirconia, right? It's a way to clean it, and it's the only way to get micromechanical retention. The chemical interaction with zirconia also is very, very important, making sure that all the sites of phosphates are going to be taken up by the primer that's there. Now, that primer better have MDP in it, right? Now, there are other adhesives, GDPM and the pentamonomer from Dentsply Sirona. The pentamonomer hasn't been studied as well of how successful it is at functioning as a primer. GDPM, but especially MDP, has shown really, really high results in zirconia bonding. Okay. All right. So let's talk about zirconia cementation. There's an acronym out there called APC for zirconia cementation. That stands for air abrasion, primer, composite cement. And this has been studied quite a bit. Here's a study that was done in 2019. Different surface modifications combined with universal adhesives and the impact on bonding properties of zirconia to composite resin cement. Basically, they found that airborne particle abrasion with low pressure, right, in combination with universal adhesive primers promotes clinical success of adhesively bonded zirconia restorations. This idea of air abrasion plus a primer plus a cement is that's the best way to adhesively bond zirconia in place. Now, the big debate comes in whether or not your adhesive can work as both the primer and the adhesive on the tooth, primer on the ceramic and adhesive on the tooth. Now, the answer is yes, qualified. Different primers and different adhesives have different components, right? The zirconia primers have to have MDP in it. And so like QRA came out with the ceramic primer, monobond, plus, right? Z prime from Bisco obviously is kind of the gold standard when it comes to MDP. And these all have heavy amounts of MDP. MDP is that primary component in their primer. And MDP is really, really important in the adhesive nature of zirconia. This is the reason why. MDP have these long chains, you can see here on the side of this formula where it has these phosphate groups that bond to both lithium ions, right? And if we think about the different components, we're like lithium to silicate, right? Lithium ions, the zirconia, and those phosphate groups bond to the zirconia, hydroxyapatite with the calcium, right? Phosphate is the main key here, right? Phosphate loves zirconia. I mean, it just loves it, loves it, loves it. And so this is kind of how it works, right? With zirconia oxide and the phosphate. I know I'm not a chemist, but I understand this concept that zirconia loves phosphates. And these phosphate groups on 10-MDP are really, really important. Now, there are a number of different monomers in the different adhesives that are out there. So Clearfill SE, right? QRA was the first ones who came out with MDP long, long ago in Clearfill SE, right? That was the first really breakthrough, and it's been super successful. Once the patent ran out, then 10-MDP got put into tons of different primers, right? Scotch-Bond Universal, obviously heavily researched. They put MDP in there. What's interesting is that 3M also has another one that, Promptel Pop, that 7th generation bonding agent, that has MHP in it. It's not even MDP. So that is not nearly as good as the 10-MDP. Now, Kerr And their adhesive systems, they have 2 chains on the end. So it's a little bit different in the GDPM monomer. Obviously, GDPM has been shown to be extremely successful in enamel and dentin bonding over the years. But 10-MDP is really the kind of the one that stands above the rest for zirconia bonding. Now, the reason why Z prime is such the gold standard in priming is because Z prime is only MDP. Whereas some of these other ceramic primers have other things in them, Z prime is just solely MDP. Like it's literally just that. So the Monobond Plus has some silane in it, right? And the ceramic primer from Curare has got silane in it, and it has other components inside of it. Bisco is one of the only companies to still have components of products where it is isolated to exactly what you want. So Z prime is just MDP. Okay, monomers to dentin. This is the adhesive structure to the dentin. Different functional monomers, self-edging adhesives, right, with different functional monomers applied to dentin. Basically, they found that 10-MDP is great, and GDPM is even higher bond strengths, immediate bond strengths. So because of the wetting of the dentin surface and everything else. So to the dentin, MDP, GDPM, both super duper good. Monomers to zirconia, they basically found that MDP containing products provide the highest initial shear bond strengths, right? Way more reliable than a resin modified glass ionomer, of course, because of the way that it functions. Okay. If you want these slides, I think I can send you those links for those studies, or they're everywhere on PubMed. But the way that I would approach it, if you are really trying to bond zirconia to a non-retentive prep, you want to use the best in every procedure, right? Every procedure has a purpose. If you're trying to make the adhesive, or if you're trying to make dentin ready to receive the cement, you want to make it as good as you can do. And that would be using a universal adhesive on the dentin, right? So that's great. All bond universal would be great for that. But for me, if I'm trying to make my ceramic as good as it can be, why not use a primer that is dedicated for MDP? And that Z prime, right, is pure MDP, as well as some of those other ceramic primers. Now, the problem is when saliva gets involved, because with saliva, right, when you try in a crown here, you get phospholipids. And phospholipids, all those phosphate groups on those phospholipids will occupy all the bonding sites that you want for your primer, right? So if you try it in and all those bonding sites are taken up by the phospholipids, then that's why zirconia crowns so often would come off, right? Because all of the sites that we're bonding, we're trying to get it on, occupied by phospholipids, and so you couldn't use a primer effectively. That's where IvoClean came into play, and now Zirclean from Bisco. Now, what Zirclean and IvoClean are, the products are almost identical, and what those products are, they are liquid zirconia. So imagine you have your regular zirconia crown, and phospholipids are there, but if you clean it with IvoClean or Zirclean, that Zirclean is liquid zirconia, and it has even a higher affinity for those phospholipids. So those phospholipids will come off of the intaglio of the crown. They'll bond on to the Zirclean, and then you rinse it off, and then you have a clean surface. So my take here is, where does sandblasting come in? I would say this is the way that I would prepare it, right? You try it in, you make your adjustments, make sure you polish it, right? Maybe this is for another day, but trying in the crown and making your adjustments, you have to do high polish all the way so you don't induce more fractures into your zirconia crowns. But if you polish it all the way back up, it will regain its strength. So you try it in, Zirclean for 20 seconds, right? Rinse that out. That's when I would sandblast it. Then you have clean, ready to go surface for your primer, right? One of these three are the ones I like. And then you can use your cement, okay? Now, some people say, well, where can I sandblast? And I would say you can sandblast in these three areas because you just have to get it, that micromechanical action, right? So you can sandblast at the very beginning. Maybe it's coming from the lab sandblast. Maybe not. I don't know. You should ask your lab. When you get it before, when the day starts, maybe you want to sandblast it then. After you try it in, maybe you want to sandblast it then and then do zircon. Or the way that I do it is I try it in, make my adjustments, polish it, then I zircon it, right? And then I go and sandblast it. I feel like that is the cleanest surface that I can get before I put my primer on. Then I'm ready to bond my zirconia into place. Okay? So here's an example, right? When I talked about the semi-retentive prep there, throwing the Z prime in there, then sandblasting it. Oh, sorry, excuse me. I've tried it and made my adjustments, zircon, sandblast, then I throw my primer in there, the adhesive on the tooth. Now, one thing that's really important after you cement it is to let the chemical cure happen. Like I said, maybe you're not getting light cure all the way through it. So you want to wait a full 4 minutes before making any final adjustments on there, right? You got to wait because you have to wait for that full polymerization to happen. If you start at like the 2 minute mark, like you're curing it, you're like, oh, this will be fine. Now I'm going to make some final occlusal adjustments. The reality is that polymerization hasn't gone full. And so you can be making it loose before it's fully seated. And then you could be the one being the cause for it to come off later. So let it just sit there for 4 minutes, right? Maybe take an x-ray, see if there's anything underneath the margins, and don't adjust it before 4 minutes. Now, side tip, what they call these days pro tips. For me, my zirconia crowns, if it's an A2 for the shade guide, I go to 1 over. So from A, I go to C, and I drop from 2 to 3. For me, that's what it's been like with my ceramics. I go from an A to a C, and then I drop 1 number. And I find that matches the tooth structure way better than A to A when it comes to zirconia. So you can see this is a pretty good match. Not that anyone's seen it back there, but I think it's worthwhile. Okay, here's a little video. I was trying to jimmy rig my iPhone. I don't have those cool headlamp videos yet, so this is one just from my iPhone right in front of me. So it's not, and it's sped up. Sorry, let me bring down the volume. So it's sped up, but here you can see me. I am putting the adhesive on the tooth structure. Now, one thing you can see is that I have an isolite in. I feel like if you're gonna bond a crown in there, right, then you have to have it isolated, or else saliva is gonna ruin everything you're trying to accomplish. So get that isolite in there, get it isolated, right? Make sure you, after your adhesive, now remember with some adhesives, you don't have to light cure it with the corresponding cement, but you should take away the solvents. So make sure you air dry that there. So there you can see me putting that thing in there, making sure I get good finger pressure. Then tack cure, floss that margin. Light cure what I can. And then I let it sit. If you're doing with the isolite, I'm like another 2 minutes just sitting there. And then I take it out and I have them bite down on a cotton roll for the last 2 minutes. All right. So that's kind of the way that I do it. Now, what if it turns into Emax? Okay. Think about our ceramic. Now, every procedure has a purpose. What is the purpose behind an Emax procedure? Can't I just do it the same way? Well, yes and no, because the way you get micromechanical retention from an Emax is a little bit different from zirconia. And the chemical interaction with lithium disilicate, because it's glass, is different from your zirconia. But can you do it the same way? That's a trendy question to ask, trendy topic to talk about. We know that glass ceramics are etchable with hydrofluoric acid, right? And so hydrofluoric acid etch is really important. I'll talk about this here in another second about sandblasting, but hydrofluoric acid etch is really important. But what are we trying to accomplish here by do we even have to use a primer? Some people are like, do I even have to use a primer? What are we trying to accomplish? And I'll come back to this. What we're trying to accomplish when we're priming substrates, right, is to take a ceramic surface, which is hydrophilic in nature, right? The ceramic is hydrophilic. And then your resin cement, which is hydrophobic. And you're trying to improve the wettability. It's just the same thing as if we were bonding to dentin. Hydrophilic dentin, hydrophobic composite, and we're trying to essentially prime the surface. So what silane does, right? What silane does is essentially it is decreasing the contact angle and increasing the wettability of that ceramic surface. That's all we're trying to do. And here's a study that was done in 2011, basically saying the different coupling agents, right, change the contact angle. The bond strength of ceramic was significantly influenced by the silane coupling agent and not by the resin cement, right? The silane was more important than the resin cement. The better the wettability of resin on different silanized ceramic surfaces could improve their bond durability. Really important, right? That's what we're trying to do. Now, again, do you have to use silane? Basically, they've found, this is my favorite part of the study, bond strength varied from 0 to 61 megapascals. 0, I love that. Basically, right, if there is some saliva introduced or anything that could negatively impact it, we want to try to use silane. They found that hydrofluoric acid etch with the silane created a durable bond. That is just over and over what they found. So, hydrofluoric acid etch. Now, many people will say, hey, well, you're supposed to sandblast this? Now, Emax was made by Ivoclar, right? And in their instructions, they talk about not sandblasting lithium disilicate because you can introduce internal fractures. Now, I've been practicing for 16 years. Do I know if sandblasting has contributed to the weakening of lithium disilicate? No. But have I had lithium silicates break? Yes. It could be from sandblasting? Maybe. I think it's probably more to the prep design more than anything else. But, I mean, what are you really accomplishing with sandblasting more than a hydrofluoric acid etching? Not really a whole lot. And so, sometimes I sandblast it, maybe if this is a re-cement, and I try to make sure all that prior cement is out of there. What's worse, hitting it with a burr or sandblasting? I think hitting it with a burr. So if I can get the cement out through sandblasting, then I'm going to do that. But if you can avoid sandblasting, right, especially the first time you're putting a crown in, hydrofluoric acid etch should be plenty for micromechanical retention. Now, silane works best with Emax, right? That's silane. Because what does silane do? The silane, right, the silica and the methacrylate is what combine together here. So silane works really well with making this better than MDP or GDPM, right? The pure silane is your very best that you get with lithium disilicate. Whenever you can have pure silane, those are the highest bond that you get. So now you come up with this concept of dirty silanes, right? Because there are lots of products that contain silane, but how much silane? Now, again, when I was talking about Bisco, they like to keep their things separate. You may not know, if you're not using a lot of silane, pure silane, it can go bad. So if it's sitting on your shelf and you're not using it quite a bit, you may want to get parts A and B silane. So Bisco makes these 2 bottles, right? They've been making these for years and years and years. Because A and B silane, they won't go bad. That has long shelf life. The porcelain primer, it is pure silane, but it only has, that shelf life is less than the A and B primer. So if you want to put A and B silane components together, that way you know it's always pure silane, always ready to go. Now, Ivoclar used to make a product called Monobond S, and that was pure silane. They don't even make it anymore. They now just sell Monobond Plus. Kerr still, I believe they still sell a pure silane primer. But most companies don't sell a pure silane anymore. Most companies now have what I call dirty silanes. Now, it doesn't mean that they don't work, but all of these products have different amounts of silane in them. Well, besides Z Prime, right? Because Z Prime doesn't have any silane. So please do not use Z Prime for lithium disilicate. It's only MDP. It doesn't really work. So don't use Z Prime on lithium disilicate. It's funny because Ivoclar also, when they went away from Monobond S, they did introduce Monobond Etch and Prime. And every study that's out there basically shows that Monobond Etch and Prime doesn't work nearly as well as hydrofluoric acid etch plus Monobond Plus. I mean, that should be pretty basic for all of us to understand, right? That hydrofluoric acid etching is obviously going to work better than an etchant that's inside of a silane that it can, I mean, obviously. So don't use Monobond Etch and Prime, and don't use MDP on Emax. These other ones, your dirty silanes, they all do work. They really do, right? The universal bonding agents all have silane components in them. So they all can function as a silane. But the question comes in how much silane is in there. This study was just done in 2020, Journal of Mechanical Behavior of Biomedical Materials, which is an interesting journal, perusing that one. And basically they were looking at MDP with different amounts of silane and what would happen. The bond strength of lithium disilicate ceramics was improved because they went like 1% silane, 2%, 3%, 4%, 5%. So the more silane you can get in there, the better. MDP primers alone are best suited for zirconia, right? But you want to get 5% silane in there. So when you think about those dirty silanes, right, you think how much silane is actually in there. So maybe I want more pure silane with my lithium disilicates. So essentially, this is what I do with Emax. Hydrofluoric acid etch, try it in, make your adjustments. Now you can clean this with phosphoric acid etch. Obviously, you can't use phosphoric acid, phosphates, right, with zirconia. That is detrimental. That's, I mean, totally bad. You're just putting more phosphates up there. But you can clean off lithium disilicate with phosphoric acid etch. So hydrofluoric acid first, try and make your adjustments, polish, then clean it with phosphoric acid, then put your primer on, right? When it's all clean, you can put your primer on. These are my preferred, and then your cements. Okay, let's talk just briefly about retentive. Right now, with all of this bonding, we were talking about bonding. With retentive, do we really need to bond? I have some doctors say, I just want one procedure for every cementation. If you want one procedure for every cementation, then forget this part of it and use always a primed resin cement of some type. Because there are a whole bunch of cements that are in this self-adhesive resin cement category that can work for your retentive preparation, right? Theracem is great from Bisco. This one is one of the only, I believe it is the only. It is a resin cement, but it has, I know, I couldn't understand how this worked initially, but because of the way that the pH, it is the only one that goes to a pH neutral in a couple of minutes. And because of that, it can release fluoride and calcium. So essentially the same thing that's in Theracal, right? If you're familiar with their product, Theracal. So Theracem is the same idea in that it's resin cement that releases fluoride and calcium over time. Now we like rely excluding and RMGIs because they release fluoride, and when they get when there's moisture, then it releases more fluoride. But they're not even as basic as Theracem, right? It's still an acid-base reaction, and they're not even as basic as what Theracem or Ceramir, right? Those cements are very, very basic. And so basic cements are more stable in the oral environment. So Theracem has some really good advantages. It's just not very strong, right? So for retentive prep, Theracem makes great sense. Now, Theracem does also have MDP in it, so it bonds naturally to a zirconia crown. But again, it's not going to be nearly as strong as if you're using a primer of pure MDP, right? So all of these all these self-adhesive resin cements, Calibra, right, Panavia, Maxim Elite, Bissem, Reliax, Unisem, and there's so many SEMs, right? All those self-adhesive resin cements, they work great for retentive preparations. I would totally tell you to use any of those cements on any retentive preparation. Those are going to work totally, totally fine. And do I still grab Reliax Lutein when it's a zirconia crown? When it's retentive? Absolutely. It's like the easiest one. So there's no reason not, and it's obviously way cheaper than some of these other ones. So that's still totally fine. And RMGI is completely okay for a retentive preparation, right? But it's understanding when I'm going to use these cements and what the situation. Every procedure has a purpose. Now, again, self-adhesive resin cements, this is one of the reasons why I don't use them. If you look at the degree, now this is an old study back in 2009, and they have improved somewhat, but the reality is most self-adhesive resin cements are around that 16 to 20 megapascals, whereas resin cements are in the 30 or 40 megapascals. So, go ahead, use an RMGI retentive, doesn't really matter to me. All right. I wanted to show a little bit about veneer cementation, but it's 4:46. All right, I'll do a couple minutes here. I'll start a little bit about veneers, and then we can go to Q&A. So get your questions ready. In fact, why don't you go ahead and start populating the question center with questions, and I'll start talking about some veneer cementation. Now, this happened to be a no prep veneer case. You rarely get these, right? But this is a completely no prep veneer case, and I've already etched. I have what is that thing from Ivoclar called? I can't think of what she's wearing, but Optigate. I have an Optigate in there, and she's already fully etched. And I'll just kind of show you some things here with how I like to do. I've already etched total etch. That's why it's so frosty. Now scrubbing is so important, right? Scrub. I'm scrubbing here, right? This one I use a lot of Ivoclar products when I'm putting my cements in. But here you can see me scrub. You can see how long I'm scrubbing, and this is sped up. Scrub, and then make sure you get your solvents out, right? You've got to air dry those solvents, 5 to 10 seconds at least. You got to get the solvents out, whether it's water or acetone or ethanol. You've got to get those solvents out. So I am really getting those solvents out, right? Then tack cure. I'm curing the adhesive, cure the adhesive. And then I put a little bit of cement on the tooth as well as inside of my veneer, right? And then I put it on there, usually do a couple at a time here. Right, so there's my first 4. One thing that's really important is that you do a try and sequence, so you know what the best sequence is to put these veneers in. I like to brush my margins with the cement to make sure I'm not missing anything. Put a little more cement right on the tooth, then I pop these veneers right in, right? Good seat. And now my margins, right? Oftentimes it's like an infinity margin. I work with Nelson Rigo Smiles, he's incredible. And then I brush these margins to make sure my cement is everywhere where I want it to be. This is just light cured cement, right? This is only light cured. So I have tons of working time. Put in all of my veneers. These are 10 veneers that I'm putting in. Now I've since got a tack cure light. I didn't have a tack cure light when I did this demonstration, or I didn't have the texture component of it for some reason. But you can see I'm still brushing all of those margins. And then I come back and I hold down with my probe and I tack cure these, tack, tack, tack. And then what I like to do is then I come back and I break all of my contacts with a serrated strip, right? So another advantage of making sure you brush it through is that you're able to come and do this. Now, obviously you don't want to induce bleeding, so make sure you have super healthy tissues. So if you don't have healthy tissues, you might want to be rethinking about the sequence of all this. But I pop through all of my contacts, make sure they're all clean, and I can floss them, just using a serrated strip there, right? All those contacts. Come make sure it's all the way through. And then I'll come and I'll brush the margins again. I've been doing a sable brush now instead of maybe one of those, and I brush those a whole bunch. And then I come back, cure all the way through, cure, 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 cure. And then I'm coming back in and cleaning up all my margins with a gold knife, a 12 blade, and then starting to floss all my margins, everything like that coming through, and we'll go from there. Okay, so my veneer cementation, that's the fastest veneer cementation that you'll see here in a webinar. But hydrofluoric acid etch, right? My veneers, feldspathic. Make sure you don't hydrofluoric acid etch them for too long. Think about what your try-in sequence is. Make sure you use a try-in paste with the right colors because they can be adjusted. And so you're going to use the different colors of your try-in paste, and you're going to get the right sequence down. After those have been tried in, you know what the sequence is. You take them out. I have my assistant clean them with phosphoric acid, and then I use my primer, right? At that time, then I'm getting the teeth all ready with etching and adhesive, and then I go with the cementation. So first I brush my margins, right? Once it's in there, then I tack cure, break my contacts with serrated strip, brush my margins again, then to full cure. All right, everybody. I hope the next time you do a cementation procedure, you think, what is the purpose of what I am trying to do? Does it have to do with cement? Does it have to do with the prep design? I hope we think prep design, then we think cement, then we think ceramic, and then we break each of those down to what do I have to do to make this just the right way, that we're not being influenced by things that shouldn't influence us, like the timing of the day, how busy we are, but think about every procedure has that purpose, and how can I make that purpose perfect today? All right, here's my contact info. And now we'll do a little Q&A. So let's get that Q&A session going. Throw in those questions. I'm going to change my screen here, and let's see if we can talk about it. Okay. Let's see here. So the question here is, adding a bonding agent to the tooth before cementing it with Maxim Elite will cause more retention. So as you might think, right, is now that you've thought about this process, every procedure has a purpose. If I want more retention, absolutely adding an adhesive bonding agent. And if you're going to use Maxim Elite, I would use Optibond Universal or Optibond XTR, right? And that would definitely increase the retention of that. Another question coming in, does bleach work to clean zirconia? Does it? Not really. I mean, it will get off some of the phosphates, but not nearly, right? You need to have liquid zirconia, something that for sure will bring in all of those phosphate groups from the phospholipids. So I would go with one of those Zirclean or Ivoclean. Both of those would be really good. All right. Another question, what's my opinion on GC America cements, such as GSEM1 resin cement? I'm not familiar with GSEM1, but I'm assuming that GSEM is the same thing as GSEM1 is the same thing as GSEM. They had a couple of genial cement, and I'm very familiar early on with GC. I worked quite a bit with them. And again, it's not necessarily the brand. It's understanding where does the cement fall. That's the most important. That is the most important component with your cementation process, is understanding where does my cement fit, right? Does it fit in self-adhesive resin cement? Does it fit in my retentive, non-retentive, primed, right? That's what it is. So I think there are a lot of great cements, and GC makes great cements. In fact, I think Fujicem is a great retentive cement. Do they have great resin cement? Sure, but it's understanding how to use them most effectively. All right, Fuji 9 as a cement. Fuji 9 is not a cement. It is a glass ionomer. It's not a glass ionomer cement. So I wouldn't use Fuji 9 as a cement. I use Fuji 9 a lot in my practice, but not as a cement. Interesting. Yes, a question here. Self-adhesive resin cements like Calibra Universal don't recommend adhesive use on their teeth in the IFU. Do I know why this is? Yes, I do. The reason is because companies want to make it as easy as possible for you to use their product. So they want to decrease the amount of steps. Calibra Universal absolutely works better if you put prime and bond elect on the tooth. 100%, 100%. It always will work better if you use prime and bond elect on the tooth structure in addition to using that cement. Okay, so use your brain. You guys all know how to do this. I was not mean to be flippant. I'm saying for reals. You don't necessarily have to think, oh, we shouldn't have to do the adhesive on the tooth. No, absolutely. If you want to increase retention, then do that. Okay. So another question about why do I etch or sandblast before trying? Try and step that can make the process contaminated. So remember, etching or sandblasting doesn't necessarily have to do with the contamination, it has to do with the micromechanical retention. So you can do that before trying them in, but you can also do it after you try them in. So either way, as long as you do it, that's the micromechanical retention. If you clean it off completely, then it's not contaminated. And so the micromechanical retention is still there, right? So you can do that at any point. Someone asked if there's a no prep luminaire. I don't use luminaires. I use feldspathic porcelain, but also to control the position of the veneers and the cement without isolation. It's a big question. You know, I used to use full rubber dam isolation when I was cementing my veneers. And if you have a problem with isolation, then yes, you should do more. You should do more steps that prevent any type of contamination in your veneer cementation. Now, I have been doing that process that you see for a really long time. I've had great success with it, as long as your assistants and with the Optrogate, I'm able to maintain great isolation there, and I'm never having any saliva come up in there. So it's worked really well for me. But hey, by all means, if you can use a rubber dam really, really well with your veneer cementation, absolutely do it. Do it. Okay. Let's see another question here. Is it better to total etch the tube prep and then do adhesive for self-etching adhesive before cementing? Oh, great question. So the answer is that self-etchants work very well to dentin. So I do not total etch the dentin. If it's just dentin that I'm bonding to, we should use a self-adhesive self-etching universal adhesive, right? The self-etching universal adhesives work very, very well to dentin. In fact, their bond strengths are in the 40s. So it's totally fine just to use self-etching universal adhesives on dentin before cementing. You don't have to total etch. But if you're using it on any part that has an enamel, you should definitely use total etch. All right. That's going to wrap it up for today. I hope that was helpful and that your cementation can even be better as you're thinking every procedure has a purpose. What is the purpose of this procedure? All right, take care, everybody. Thanks so much.
Thanks for attending this Viva Learning webinar. In order to get your CE credit, you will need to pass the CE exam. To do so, return to the website, make sure you are logged in, click on either CE in Progress or My Account. Click on the webinar title and take the CE exam. Thank you, and see you next time on Viva Learning.